What did Allstate, when they finally came back with an actual assessment, a real number, what was that number again?
$46,000.
$46,000. So you went to considerable expense on your own. You hired your own independent adjuster to come back out and do all of this over again. And that person, looking at all of this evidence, that person found that the damage was in the neighborhood of what?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how your independent adjuster, how much did that person estimate the damage was?
$497,000.
$497,000. Allstate offered you 40, basically.
Correct.
And you spent several hours, Ms. Miguel said in her testimony a moment ago, you spent several hours doing a very thorough inspection. Is that your memory also?
Yeah, that's correct.
And how serious would you say the damage was in your own, just your personal recollection?
Extremely, probably the most serious that I saw on this deployment.
Wow, the most serious that you saw on the deployment. And then before you can even complete your work, you're taken off the case, is that right?
Yes.
Why do you think that happened? Mr. Schroeder, have you ever been told to change estimates to reduce payouts?
Yeah, frequently.
And when you've pushed back on this, if you've ever said no, what happens then? When you submitted your report to Allstate recommending several $100,000 worth of payments to Ms. Miguel and her husband, what happened then?
My estimate was rejected, and I was advised to.
What's up, Patriots? Welcome back to America First, the channel that puts hardworking Americans before corporate greed and political corruption. If you're new here, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because we're bringing you the truth that mainstream media won't touch. And if you want to support our mission to expose the corruption that's destroying our great nation, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us continue fighting for the American people. Today, we're diving deep into something that affects every single American homeowner, and it's going to make your blood boil. We're talking about Senator Josh Hawley's recent hearing, where he absolutely demolished the insurance industry and exposed how they're systematically defrauding American families. This isn't just about one case, folks. This is about a pattern of corporate corruption that's robbing hardworking Americans of their life savings when they need help the most.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vitale. Thanks to all of the witnesses. We'll now have some rounds of questioning. I will start, and let me start with you, Ms. Miguel. So it's September 27th, 2024, Hurricane Helene hits Georgia, hits your home, causing very significant damage. I think we've got a picture of some of the damage here. Let's have a look. Does this look pretty familiar to you?
It does.
It looks pretty severe. I mean, that's a massive tree right there in the front part of your home, and you're an Allstate policyholder, is that correct?
Correct.
And Allstate sends out an adjuster, you said pretty quickly just a moment ago, is that
About
correct?
3 weeks after.
Oh, well, that's not very quick. Okay, 3 weeks after. All right, and that you were told at the time in this first inspection verbally that the adjuster agreed with you this was very severe damage. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
I think we maybe have a second picture. Let's look at another view of this just to give a real impression. Here's a breezeway that looks to be nearly completely destroyed. You can see some of that roof damage, quite extensive, that you were talking about in your testimony. All of this looks familiar to you, I'm sure.
Yes.
Now, after this first adjuster agrees with you that, yes, there's very significant damage, what did Allstate, when they finally came back with an actual assessment, a real number, what was that number again?
$46,000.
$46,000. So you went to considerable expense on your own. You hired your own independent adjuster to come back out and do all of this over again. And that person, looking at all of this evidence, that person found that the damage was in the neighborhood of what?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how your independent adjuster, how much did that person estimate the damage was?
$497,000.
$497,000. Allstate offered you 40, basically.
Correct.
And you're still waiting for this process to be resolved all this time later. Is that right?
That's right.
Let me just ask you now, Mr. Schroeder, because you were that first adjuster who worked for Allstate who came out to look at this home. You were a field adjuster deployed for Allstate through pilot catastrophe. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you were the first one to inspect Miss Miguel's home after the hurricane. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you went in person, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you spent several hours, Ms. Miguel said in her testimony a moment ago, you spent several hours doing a very thorough inspection. Is that your memory also?
Yeah, that's correct.
And how serious would you say the damage was in your own, just your personal recollection?
Extremely, probably the most serious that I saw on this deployment.
Wow, the most serious that you saw on the deployment, which makes sense given these photos. So you start, if I understand correctly, you start to prepare an estimate for a full replacement of this breezeway right here. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's correct.
But then you were instructed, you were told by the higher ups, no, we're not going to do a full replacement of the breezeway. So only do an assessment for a partial replacement of the breezeway. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so then you start working on that, and you're working to get as big of a damage claim as you can from Ms. Miguel in line with the facts after you've already been told, no, we're not going to do the full thing. And then before you can even complete your work, you're taken off the case. Is that right?
Yes.
Why do you think that happened?
I was told it was due to time I was taking too long, but I don't believe that is the case. I think that Allstate saw from this and my recently prior estimates of being very thorough and complete and going back and forth with reviewers on coverage, that it was going to be a higher estimate, and it would be more cost-effective to reassign it to an adjuster that would listen better.
Yeah, an adjuster who would lowball the policyholder. Really, I mean that's what we're talking about. You're removed from the case. They took 3 weeks to send you out to begin with, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're removed once it looks like you're actually going to do some justice for Ms. Miguel. Let me just ask you more broadly, Mr. Schroeder, have you ever been told to change estimates to reduce payouts?
Yeah, frequently.
And when you've pushed back on this, if you've ever said no, what happens then?
If I say no, then the claims typically get reassigned due to, they say, either lack of compliance or other reasons, like I'm taking too long.
In your experience, was this kind of thing a one-off thing, or was this a pattern?
This was definitely a pattern.
Is it fair to say then that Allstate's priority in your experience was not getting the best possible award for their clients, it was in protecting their bottom line?
Certainly in protecting their bottom line, yeah.
Mr. Milliken, let me just come to you, because you were then yet another adjuster in this same case sent out to look at Miss Miguel's property. You worked as a field adjuster for Allstate through pilot catastrophe for about 8 years. Do I have that right?
At least 8 years, yes.
Yeah. In that time, you have personally inspected hundreds of properties damaged after storms and disasters. Is that fair to say?
Thousands.
Thousands. And you're trained to determine the extent and cause of the damage and how much it costs to repair it. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me just ask you about Ms. Miguel's claim. You were assigned to re-inspect her home, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you testified earlier that you went about that diligently. You could see that there was very extensive damage. That was your initial impression. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And you reviewed all of the reports. There was an engineer's report by this time. There was the public adjuster's report. You reviewed all of those things diligently. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
When you submitted your report to Allstate recommending several $100,000 worth of payments to Ms. Miguel and her husband, what happened then?
My estimate was rejected, and I was advised to alter it to a lower figure.
So you were told to alter the estimate and to alter your findings as well?
I was told to alter my estimate. I don't know that the findings was told to be altered.
Were the alterations that you were told to make, were those consistent with your own review of the property and your own assessment of the damage?
No, no, sir.
Did you write that up in a detailed estimate, what you were told to do?
I did, yes, sir.
And Allstate then, they send that estimate ultimately to the property owner, is that correct?
I'm obligated to send the estimate to the policyholder.
And is there any record anywhere the policyholder would ever know that your initial findings, your recommendations were rejected and somebody told you to come in and alter them?
No, sir.
Let me just ask you more broadly, have you ever been told, in other cases with Allstate to alter or delete your findings?
Absolutely.
In fact, you testified just a second ago, I think, that you were frequently asked to alter factual findings, delete material, and sometimes include items that were false. Did I hear you correctly when you said that?
Yes, sir.
In the overwhelming majority of cases where you were asked to do something like this, did that cause the estimate to the policyholder to go up or to go down?
To go down.
What is your assessment of what Allstate's ultimate goal here is? Is it to pay out the policy according to the terms of the policy to the best extent they can, or is it to protect their bottom line and to use you and your report as necessary to meet that end, to make sure they make as much money as possible?
100% to use me to enable them to make as much money as possible.
And you would say that this is a pattern. This isn't just something that happened one time like in Miss Miguel's case. You've been doing this for a long time, and you've observed this to be a pattern with Allstate and in the industry.
I have, yes, sir.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Kim.
Let me set the scene for you. Hurricane Helene tears through Georgia on September 27, 2024. A massive natural disaster that destroys homes, businesses, and lives. Miss Miguel, a hardworking American homeowner who did everything right, who paid her premiums faithfully to Allstate, suddenly finds herself facing the complete destruction of her home. We're talking about a massive tree crushing the front of her house, her breezeway completely obliterated, roof damage that's extensive and severe. This woman's entire life turned upside down in a matter of hours. Now, this is exactly why we pay insurance premiums, right? This is the social contract we have with these companies. We pay them thousands of dollars every year, faithfully, religiously, so that when disaster strikes, they'll be there to help us rebuild our lives. That's the American way. That's how capitalism is supposed to work. But what happened next is absolutely disgusting and represents everything that's wrong with corporate America today. First, Allstate takes 3 weeks to even send an adjuster out to look at this woman's destroyed home. 3 weeks. Can you imagine being a homeowner? Your house is destroyed, you've got nowhere to live, and the company you've been paying for years can't even be bothered to send someone out for 3 weeks? This is unconscionable. This is corporate negligence at its worst. In America, we used to have companies that actually cared about their customers, that understood that when disaster strikes, time is of the essence. But today's corporate America is all about maximizing profits and minimizing payouts. When the adjuster finally shows up, Mr. Schroeder, he takes one look at this destruction and immediately recognizes it for what it is. He calls it the most serious damage he saw on his entire deployment. The most serious. This man has seen hundreds of damaged properties, and this one stands out as the worst. He spends several hours doing a thorough, professional inspection because that's what American workers do when they take pride in their jobs. He's preparing to do right by this American family. But here's where it gets really disgusting, folks. The moment Mr. Schroeder starts doing his job properly, the moment he starts preparing an estimate that would actually cover the cost of repairs, Allstate's corporate overlords step in and shut him down. They tell him, no, you're not going to do a full replacement of that destroyed breezeway. You're going to lowball this American family. And when he pushes back, when he tries to do the right thing, they remove him from a case entirely. This is corporate corruption at its absolute worst. This is what happens when Wall Street executives prioritize shareholders over American families. Mr. Schroeder testified under oath that he was told it was because he was taking too long, but he knows the truth, and we know the truth. He was removed because he was going to give Miss Miguel what she deserved, what she had paid for, what she was legally entitled to under her policy. And let's talk about the pattern here, because this isn't an isolated incident. Mr. Schroeder testified that he was frequently told to change estimates to reduce payouts. This is systematic fraud, folks. This is a business model built on cheating American families out of their rightful claims. When he would push back and try to do the right thing, they would reassign his cases to adjusters who would listen better. In other words, adjusters who would participate in the fraud. Now they bring in Mr. Milliken, another adjuster with 8 years of experience and thousands of property inspections under his belt. This is a professional who knows his job, who takes pride in his work. He goes out, he does his due diligence, he reviews all the reports, he sees the same extensive damage that Mr. Schroeder saw. He submits his professional recommendation for several $100,000 in damages because that's what it's going to take to make this American family whole again. And what happens? Allstate rejects his professional assessment and tells him to alter it to a lower figure. They're literally telling this man to commit fraud, to lie on his professional report, to cheat an American family out of their rightful claim. This is what corporate America has become under the current system, where profits matter more than people, where shareholders matter more than the American families who make these companies profitable in the first place. Mr. Milliken testified that the alterations he was told to make were not consistent with his professional assessment of the damage. In other words, they were telling him to lie. They were telling him to falsify his report. And here's the kicker, folks. The policyholders, the American families being defrauded, they never see the original honest assessment. They never know that the adjuster recommended hundreds of thousands in damages but was forced to alter his findings. They just get the fraudulent lowball estimate, and they think that's the professional opinion. This is systematic deception on a massive scale. This is corporate fraud that would make the robber barons of the 19th century blush. And it's happening to American families every single day across this great nation. How many families have lost their homes, their life savings, their American dream because of this systematic fraud? The final numbers tell the whole story. Allstate offered Miss Miguel $46,000 for damage that an independent adjuster assessed at $497,000. Let me repeat that. $46,000 versus $497,000. That's more than a 10-to-1 difference. That's not a difference of professional opinion. That's fraud. That's theft. That's corporate America stealing from hardworking American families. And this brings us to the bigger picture here, patriots. This isn't just about insurance companies. This is about the fundamental breakdown of trust between American corporations and the American people. We used to have a system where companies understood that their success depended on serving their customers honestly and fairly. American businesses built their reputations on integrity, on keeping their word, on standing behind their products and services. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. We created a system where quarterly profits matter more than long-term relationships, where Wall Street analysts reward companies for cutting costs and maximizing profits, even if it means cheating their customers, where corporate executives get bonuses for finding new ways to deny legitimate claims and pocket the money that should go to American families. This is the inevitable result of putting globalist Wall Street interests ahead of American families. This is what happens when we allow corporations to become so big and powerful that they can systematically defraud their customers without consequence. This is the natural outcome of a system that rewards greed over integrity, profits over people, shareholders over stakeholders. Senator Josh Hawley deserves massive credit for exposing this corruption. This is exactly what we need more of in Washington. We need senators who will stand up to corporate power, who will fight for American families, who will use their platform to expose the systematic fraud that's destroying the American dream. This is what America First leadership looks like. This is what it means to put the interests of hardworking Americans ahead of corporate profits. But we also need to ask ourselves how we got here. How did we create a system where insurance companies can systematically defraud their customers with impunity? How did we allow corporations to become so powerful that they can essentially steal from American families without consequence? The answer is decades of policies that prioritize corporate interests over American families, that deregulated industries without ensuring accountability, that created a system where corporate executives face no real consequences for fraud. We need to understand that this insurance fraud is just one symptom of a much larger problem. It's the same mentality that allows pharmaceutical companies to price gouge American families on life-saving medications. It's the same corporate culture that allows big tech companies to censor conservative voices and manipulate elections. It's the same Wall Street mindset that crashed the economy in 2008 and then got bailed out by taxpayers while American families lost their homes. This is all connected, folks. This is all part of the same system that puts corporate profits ahead of American families, that rewards greed over integrity, that allows powerful interests to exploit hardworking Americans without consequence. And until we address the root causes of this corruption, until we restore accountability to corporate America, American families will continue to be victimized by this systematic fraud. The solution isn't more government regulation that will inevitably be captured by the same corporate interests. The solution is competition, accountability, and transparency. We need to break up these massive corporations that have become too big to fail and too powerful to be held accountable. We need to create a system where companies that defraud their customers face real consequences, where executives who commit fraud go to jail, where shareholders who profit from fraud lose their investments. We need to restore the American system of competitive capitalism, where companies succeed by serving their customers honestly and fairly, not by finding new ways to cheat them. We need to bring back the American values of integrity, honesty, and keeping your word. We need to create a system where American families can trust that when they pay their premiums, their insurance company will be there for them when disaster strikes. This is about more than just insurance fraud. This is about the fundamental character of American capitalism. This is about whether we're going to allow corporate greed to destroy the American dream, or whether we're going to fight back and restore the system that made America great in the first place. The American people deserve better than this. Miss Miguel deserves better than this. Every American family that pays insurance premiums deserves better than this. We deserve companies that keep their word, that honor their commitments, that understand that their success depends on serving their customers honestly and fairly. This is why we do what we do here at America First. This is why we expose the corruption, the fraud, the systematic exploitation of American families. Because somebody has to stand up for the little guy. Somebody has to fight for the American families who are being crushed by corporate greed. Somebody has to tell the truth about what's happening to our great nation. If this video opened your eyes to the systematic fraud happening in the insurance industry, make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with your friends and family because the mainstream media won't tell them this story. And if you want to support our mission to expose corruption and fight for American families, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst, where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Together, we can fight back against corporate corruption. Together, we can restore integrity to American capitalism. Together, we can make sure that American families get the justice they deserve. This is America First, and we're just getting started.